Welcome, first of all, everybody virtually to Maastricht University Campus Brussels. For those on screen who do not know me, my name is Mariolina Riantonio. I am a professor of European and Comparative Administrative Law at the Law Faculty of Maastricht University, and I'm also co-director of Maastricht University Campus Brussels, together with Dr. Paul Stevenson, who is also on screen with us today. For those of you who are new, who may be joining a Campus Brussels initiative for the first time, just a very quick introductory note to explain that Campus Brussels of Maastricht University is an interfaculty hub at the service of Maastricht University community and has the aim to expand our educational offer, strengthen the impact of the research carried out at Maastricht University, and also contribute to the development of our university's international network and profile in the framework of our strategy as the European University of the Netherlands. Now, today's talk is part of a series of events that we have labeled WhatsApp EU, which we have organized at the campus. And this event series aims to inform Maastricht University community, but also beyond, about developments in and around EU policy, as well also to encourage reflection about how EU policy impacts us as researchers and members of the academic community. In addition to Maastricht University community, we have also on screen several colleagues from our partner universities within UFE, the Young Universities for the Future of Europe Alliances. We have some members from Jeroen, the Young European Research Universities Network, and we have some friends and colleagues from UniLion, the university's EU liaison offices network. Thank you all very much for being with us today. We will dedicate the next more or less hour to learning and discussing about the European Union innovation initiatives and their opportunities for universities. Now, universities are at the heart of the innovation process, and they're also a key for innovation drivers, especially within the regional environments in which they operate. They provide the knowledge, the research that enables transformation and tackles societal challenges. In the case of Maastricht University, we also are one of the main stakeholders of Brightlands, which is a triple helix innovation hub that provides entrepreneurs, scientists, students with state-of-the-art facilities to support development, education, innovation, and growth. In Brightlands, in the various campuses of Brightlands, research is being carried out on healthy nutrition, future farming, biocircular economy, biomedical solutions, data science, artificial intelligence, and much more. And also some colleagues from Brightlands are with us today, for which we are very thankful. We are organizing this event today because, as many of you know, the European Commission has recently stepped up its effort to foster innovation in Europe in synergy with policy initiatives within education and research. And for example, there is a new European innovation agenda that is in the making. The European Innovation Council has been formally established as part of the Horizon Europe funding program, and it will operate in coordination with the European Institutes of Innovation and Technology. So innovation is clearly very high on Europe agenda, and there is a lot on the menu. With this in mind, today we want to learn specifically about the concrete opportunities for universities and their regional innovation partners. So what are the best suited funding instruments? How can we, as members of the academic community, engage in shaping the innovation policies for the future? Now, to shed light on these questions, we have the very big pleasure today to welcome Fabienne Gauthier, who is head of unit of EU and place-based innovation ecosystems at the European Innovation Council and SMEs Executive Agency, which I think we can dub AISMEA. I don't know if it's the correct abbreviation, but Fabienne, yes, you will correct me if I'm wrong. Very good, thank you. So AISMEA, as you all know probably today on screen, is responsible for developing and implementing the European Innovation Council and also managing other EU programs in the field of SME innovation ecosystem, single market, consumer policy, and the like. So we could not have had a better speaker with us today. Prior to her role today at ISMEA, Fabienne was also head of unit at the innovation ecosystems of DG Research and Innovation EIC Task Force since 2018, and also the head of unit of open space and ERA policy since 2014, and deputy head since 2011. Without further ado, I leave the floor to Fabienne, who will deliver a presentation, and then we can open the floor for comments and questions. Raise, please, the virtual hand to ask a question or use the chat function. And that being said, thank you very much, Fabienne, for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Many thanks, and good morning, everybody. And I would like, first of all, to thank Maastricht University for the kind invitation and for giving me the opportunity to present the opportunities to support innovation under Horizon Europe. So many thanks, and ladies and gentlemen, also good morning, and many thanks also for your interest in our activities. I will just briefly recall the background and the structure of Horizon Europe that sets the scene for supporting innovation under the current framework program. So if you look at Horizon Europe, which is probably well known to you, we have Horizon Europe, which is structured in three main parts, and there is a dedicated part in Pillar 3, which is dealing with Pillar 3 Innovative Europe. So here, clearly, there is an explicit objective at European level and at the level of our research and innovation policy to support market creating breakthrough innovation and to support innovators in Europe. This is done through various means, and I would go a little bit more into details about it in my next slides, but mainly it is supported via also three main funding schemes and also policy support at European level. The first one is the European Innovation Council, which supports breakthrough innovation with a budget of 10.5 billion euro. The other one, which you certainly know very well, is also the EIT with a budget of 3 billion. And for the first time, to make the link between the European Innovation Council and the EIT and to support innovation ecosystem players in the broad sense. We have a very broad definition in Horizon Europe about innovation ecosystem players. There are universities, funding organizations, startups, SMEs, regions, cities, and so on. We have dedicated schemes that support specifically these innovation ecosystem players and also the innovation ecosystems at European level, be they local, regional, or national innovation ecosystems. And this is the first time that we have this kind of support under our framework program, specifically dedicated to innovation, either via funding via the EIC or the EIT, or via support to innovation ecosystem players and their ecosystems at European level. So this is in the structure, clear policy objective, clear also a budget allocated to these activities, quite substantial budget that is allocated, and that will support innovation and breakthrough innovation in the coming years. So why did we do that? Simply because we have some issues, some challenges to face at European level. First of all is in terms of innovation performance. We all know that we have very strong research at European level. We have very strong research landscape also at European level, successful and which is also very effective and efficient. However, the innovation that we create at European level is not necessarily translated into innovation. So those innovations are there, but we need to make them reach out to the market to also go beyond the current remits of their of their creation. We also lack a breakthrough and disruptive innovation at a European level that will create the new markets of tomorrow. If we look at the digitization of our societies, if we look at the challenge linked to climate change, if we look at some issues, some challenges like artificial intelligence and so on, we have quite a number of challenges ahead of us. And here, innovation is part of the solution to our future challenges. However, we lack translating this innovation into markets, and we also lack of innovations that will foster the markets and also the innovation of tomorrow. The second gap that we have at European level in terms of innovation is the innovation funding gap, and notably this very specific and critical step throughout the whole chain of innovation creation is the step where we bring our innovations from the laboratories to the market, and this a very critical stage where we have the pre-commercial phase, and those innovations, those businesses, those companies, those startups that need to also reach out to the market, so move from the pre-commercial phase to the commercial phase. So this is also a critical gap, and we have, of course, also a challenge to face at the level of our innovation ecosystems. We have we have numerous innovation ecosystems at European level. We have 27 member states. We have regional, local innovation ecosystems. So the picture is quite fragmented at European level, which is not necessarily a weakness. On the contrary, we have a broad variety of innovation ecosystems in Europe, which is a richness, which is something on which we can build, because we also have some very powerful innovation ecosystems in Europe, but the picture is still fragmented and notably lacks connections and lacks including all the different regions and talents that we need in Europe in order to innovate. So in order to tackle these challenges, we have put in place now formally the European Innovation Council, which is the most ambitious innovation initiative of our framework program. As I said, a budget of 10.1 billion euro. And here the idea is to identify, to develop at the level of universities, labs, and also startups and so on, to develop these high risky innovations and to help those innovations grow and reach out to the market. And that is specifically a challenge when we look into disruptive deep tech innovation, because here it's a high risk sector. These are high risk companies, and which very often lack finding the adequate investment at public sector level or also at private level. So private investment is also key. And here, since these innovations are very risky, the reaching out to investment is quite difficult. So here we have set up the EIC in order to support this high risk innovation and to facilitate this access to funding via different funding means, and notably through the creation of what we call a one-stop shop for innovation, where through the agency EISMEA, as it was said a moment ago in the introduction, where we have set the agency ISMEA to deal with this funding of breakthrough innovation, and also through the creation of a dedicated EIC fund. Here, the idea is to have an agile way, a flexible way of funding companies. It will be done either via grants, or it will be done through a novelty, which is support via equity funding to those companies. Keeping in mind here that through the EU funding, we will, to a certain extent, de-risk the innovations that are put on the market, support them financially, and we expect that this financial support will bring in other investors, will bring in other funding means at national, regional, or local level, be it at the level of public funding or be it level of private funding. So this is the idea behind the EIC, and we want also to accompany those projects throughout their implementation with the support of program managers, which will help those projects to develop their visions and which will also steer these projects until they reach to the markets and they reach out to investors. So this is what is behind the idea of the EIC. As I said, more than 10 billion euro that is foreseen, calls which are implemented on a bottom-up basis, calls which are open throughout the duration of the framework program, and which are accompanied also by other funding means, which I mentioned before, the EIT and also the innovation ecosystems support. So here, clearly, a novelty under Horizon Europe and the willingness to support deep tech breakthrough innovation through dedicated funding and new ways of funding innovation. So the fully fledged EIC, as I said, will be a one-stop shop to innovators, open to all innovators in any field at any time. As I said, it's a bottom-up scheme. And here we will have some specific targeted funding on strategic challenges. If you look at Horizon Europe, when the pandemic of COVID arose, we have specifically targeted also some defined some calls which could support also innovation in order to find solutions for the pandemic. So here, clearly a bottom-up approach, but also to some extent, when needed, that we have some strategic funding that is also foreseen. As I explained before, also some agile funding from the idea to investment. And here this will be done through different funding means, grants and equity funding. First of all, we will do it through the Pathfinder. Here, this is specifically targeted advanced research on emerging technologies. Then we will also support this very critical phase where an innovation comes from the labs and needs to be commercialized. So here, this is called the transition phase under the EIC. And then once these companies have already access to the market, we want to support them with some dedicated equity funding and reach out, attract private investments via the EIC accelerator. So these are the features of the EIC, and hand in hand with this, we build on ecosystems. We provide some support to those innovators via dedicated services. A company, when it starts, needs also some support in order to be able in this growing phase to be sustainable, and we will support that with some services such as coaches, mentoring activities, investors, and connection and matchmaking also between investors and innovators. So these activities will be implemented or are implemented in parallel. I said also we will accompany the projects through program managers, and we will try to reach out to new investors. So that was for the EIC part, and now moving to the innovation ecosystems part, because as I said, we not only fund and support innovation via the EIC, via direct funding to innovators, we also do that via innovation ecosystems support. And here, how did we do that? I said just before that we have a very broad definition of innovation ecosystem players. And we know that there are many initiatives at European level that are supporting innovation, that are supporting universities, startups, businesses, be it at the level of regional bodies or national bodies or even local bodies. And what we wanted to do is to support also these companies via our dedicated part in Horizon Europe, which specifically focuses on innovation ecosystems. So we conducted 2 years ago a very broad survey where we brought in all the different innovation ecosystem players. And this survey led to very clear conclusions, because we asked them about the needs and the challenges that they would face in order for them to support innovation ecosystem players and innovation. And there were 3 main outcomes. The first outcome was the fact that innovation ecosystem players, universities, startups, even cities, regions, and so on, they need to develop their connections either with other ecosystems or with other ecosystem players in order to innovate and in order also to get access to funding. So that was one of the big outcomes. The second one was the need to get access to the right competences in order to innovate. As we know, we have huge challenges ahead of us, and especially also these twin transition challenges of digitization of our economies and societies, and also the green transition of our societies and economies. And for that, for instance, we need also the right competencies, and reaching out to these competencies, to these right skills at European level was a challenge. And the third one, which came out, was the fact that we also need investment capital, investing in innovation, and that is mainly done at European level via the EIC, and also at national level via the support of innovation agencies, cities, regions, and so on. But there is clearly a need to increase our funding allocated to innovation. And there is also another element that would put forward, which is the fact that we need to work also on the regulatory framework that is from time to time hampering innovation. We also conducted recently another survey in December in order to complement the survey that we conducted 2 years ago in order to design our work program and to design our actions under ecosystems. This survey came also to complementary conclusions. First of all, we need to look at the fact that there are, depending on the countries, depending on the territories that are addressed, we need to look at the divergence of priorities among the different countries at European level. And this is especially valid for cohesion and non-cohesion countries. There are clearly differences in their policies, clearly differences in the support that they provide to innovation, and we need to take this into account. Then there was also we were also asked for putting to some extent more directionality on some innovation and ecosystems in relation to the emerging challenges and policy needs at European level. And we could see it clearly recently with the COVID pandemic. There also was a conclusion that led to the fact that we need to be more transparent and inclusive in policymaking process. We have, as I said, a fragmented landscape of innovation ecosystem players and also innovation ecosystem territories at European level. And we need to bring in all the players in order to innovate. We need not to forget anybody, to get access to all the talents, and also to support those territories, for instance, those regions, those countries, for instance, which are less performing in innovation, and to make the adequate connection between those innovations, those ecosystems. And this will help also overcoming the innovation divide that we foster at European level. And as I said before, confirmation of the fact that we also need to do something at the level of regulations, at the level of the frameworks that hamper to some extent our innovators in Europe. Both results of this survey and also of our public consultation are available on the internet, on our website. I will share my slides with you later on. So don't hesitate to have a look into these reports, and my presentation will also be shared. So having in mind these conclusions from our public consultation, we drafted a work program on innovation ecosystems that is mainly focusing on two big blocks. The first one is supporting innovation ecosystems and their players, universities, startups, regions, cities, and so on, via a kind of policy, via a policy forum, which brings in those responsible for support and designing innovation programs at European level. So the governing authorities at national and regional level via the so-called EIC forum. And here we bring in innovation agencies, ministries, stakeholders in order to facilitate the connections, in order to open a dialogue with all the innovation ecosystem players, in order to see what we can do better, what we can do more in order to support innovation ecosystem in Europe, and how we can also remove the barriers to innovation in Europe. These barriers are manifold. It could be in terms of using the instruments that support innovation, be they funding instruments or other innovative tools like innovation procurement, or also the regulatory framework. So this is one part, the more policy part, that is supporting innovation ecosystems. And we have, of course, another part, which is another pillar, which is done through our work program on innovation ecosystems and also the EIC. And here we have designed a program based on our consultation, which is designed in three parts. The first one is the connect part, which is focusing more on the connections among the stakeholders. Bottom-up approach. We do not focus on any sector or any type of actor. Here, the aim is for those innovation players, universities, regions, funding agencies, infrastructures, and so on, as soon as they would like to design some strategies, activities, programs that could support innovation ecosystems and innovation ecosystem players, we support them via this part of the work program. So this is focusing on the connections, on support to some specific innovation means, like also social innovation, for instance, or also public sector innovation. Here we have those connections which are key and which try to respond to the outcome of our public consultation. The other part is the scale-up part, and here the idea is to focus more on business. We can see that we have difficulties in Europe to bring our innovations to the market. This is linked to funding, this is also linked to talent, and this is also linked to connections. So bringing in these three challenges into one specific block of initiatives, we have designed the scale-up part, which is focusing on much more on business. For instance, bringing in together academia and business, supporting entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship programs and so on within our innovation ecosystems. And then we have a third part, which is the successor of a program that you probably know, which is the Eurostars initiative implemented by Eureka. This makes a budget for the first 2 years of our program of 130 million euro that will specifically support either innovation ecosystem players or the innovation ecosystems themselves. So here on this slide, and as I said, my slide will be available, you have a list of the budget that is dedicated to the different actions through our work program, the call planning of our program, and also the type of action. I won't go into detail. I have a slide which gives more examples later on, but I invite you to have a look. As I said, first year around 130 million euro for the 2 first years of our ecosystems work program, and then we have also up to 500 million euro to implement throughout the whole duration of the framework program. On the next slide, you can see that in our ecosystems work program, and specifically in 2022, we have launched and we are launching a number of initiatives, and this gives you some examples of what we will be doing. For instance, under the Connect part of our work program, the call is now closed, but we foster more inclusive networks and initiatives in innovation ecosystem at European level. Here, the idea is to connect those innovation ecosystem players coming from, for instance, moderate regions, moderate innovators in Europe. So from those regions in Europe, or those countries in Europe which have moderate performance in innovation. And we want them, for instance, to connect them, those regions or those territories with innovators and with innovative countries which are more performing at European level. So here, a strong focus on inclusiveness, bringing in those different players at European level, creating those networks which will support the innovation players from the different parts of Europe in order also to facilitate those connections and to bring in the innovations to new markets, to new innovation ecosystems. Then, for instance, co-funded actions. Here, the idea is clearly also having in mind the connections to design new programs, new initiatives, new activities, where we expect some innovation ecosystem players to come together, universities, infrastructures, regions, cities, funding agencies, and so on, in order to design co-funded actions. As I said, we also do not support only deep tech innovation or technological innovation. We also focus on social innovation and also public sector innovation. And this is also, there is here clearly, there is an explicit action foreseen for which the deadline is also closed at this stage. And we also stimulate some specific tools that are dedicated to innovation and which can be very powerful at European level and notably at the level of the public sector, which are innovation procurements. Here we are also stimulating those schemes at European level. In terms of scale up, as I told you, we focus here more on the connection of businesses and bringing in those supporting the growth of companies through their ecosystems in Europe. And here, for instance, we have different types of actions under the scale up part for 2022. We want to foster entrepreneurial initiatives at European level. We also want to foster access to investments and notably, for instance, those C-level investments of companies or startups at European level. And we would like also, there is another type of action, like for instance, focusing specifically on the fact that we need to have all the talents brought in our innovation landscape, which is here focusing on Women Tech EU, which is a dedicated call for early stage startup, deep tech startups which are led by women, because it is even more difficult for women to access to funding, to access to investments in the deep tech sector. And once we have women CEOs founding their companies, there is a critical need also to accompany them in this starting process and notably in this specific sector. So as you can see in this slide, quite a broad variety of topics and calls that we are launching, where I believe due to the bottom-up approach and also due to the variety of calls which we are launching, universities have the possibility to apply to those calls and to build consortia also with other innovation ecosystem players. And then, and this will be one of my last slides, we support also innovation through another work program, specifically through the EIC work program, which, as I said, supports the European Innovation Council via the Pathfinder Transition Scheme and also EIC Accelerator. But in addition to support to deep tech and disruptive innovation, we have a number of initiatives that are also supporting innovation ecosystems, and we do this mainly via prizes, the EIC prizes. We have 4 prizes that we are implementing in Horizon Europe to support innovation and to showcase successful initiatives at European level. The iCapital Award, which rewards innovative cities, and last year it was Dortmund who was the iCapital winner of the 2021 editions. We have the prize for women innovators, also already a prize that we are running since 2014, if I'm correct. Social innovation competition, where here we also reward social innovation, and a new prize in order to foster innovation procurement, which has been launched last year and which proved also being quite promising. And then we have also support that is dedicated to existing networks at European level, like the support that is supporting startups, networks of startups here, where we want to make also the bridge with the EIC, and we support this scheme via a budget of 6 million euro on a yearly basis, and the call has just been launched. So these are the different means to support innovation. And we will, of course, those calls are currently launched. And if I can just, and this will be my last slide, tell you about some lessons learned about our scheme on different aspects. First of all, in terms of topic and the demand for those topics, we realized that for the first calls and the first editions in 2021, we had some calls which have been more successful, more attractive than others. We built, as I said, our program on the basis basis of a broad public consultation. Here we will have to see on those which worked maybe less or which were maybe less attractive at the level of the stakeholders, need to see whether we maybe need to communicate more on this, whether our schemes are maybe not already tackled in other programs, and here work on the synergies. But here for the next editions, it's probably premature at this stage to draw strong conclusions, but we will have to see how we can maybe rationalize and improve our schemes in the future. The balance between the connect part and scale up part of our work program, that was quite positive. Basically, there is a need at both levels to support innovation ecosystem players. Women Tech EU scheme proved being very successful, and we will increase the budget from 4 million to 10 million for 2022. The call is still open in June. And we, in terms of call planning, we have quite a lot of calls that we are implementing in my unit to support innovation ecosystems. But basically, we follow, be it at the level of the evaluations and call planning, we follow the basic schedules also of and processes of Horizon Europe, and this basically proved also being very positive for the first editions of our calls. And we have introduced a new funding means for our calls this year, for instance, the lump sum that we want to use more frequently. And here, this from the first outcomes, for first feedback, it seems that it is something that is also very well perceived at the level of the stakeholders and also at the level of our experts. So this just some words about the lessons learned. And as I said, to conclude, many opportunities for universities to participate either in the EIC, for instance, via the Pathfinder scheme, or under innovation ecosystems via the various topics and schemes that are launched. And I hope that you will find your interest into these schemes and that you will be able also to apply to this course. So many thanks for your attention, and I give back the floor to our host.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fabienne, for this very rich presentation. I want to open directly the floor for questions. I see that Yves has already raised his virtual hand. So please, the floor is yours. Maybe you can just say one word about yourself to introduce yourself before you pose your question.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks, Fabienne, for a very good overview of the funding resources that the European Commission has put forward. I'm Yves Aubert. I work at the University of Bergen as Senior Advisor of Innovation, and I'm sitting here through the Uniline's working group on innovation. I had a question, and one maybe a couple of questions. One was a kind of the focus as well within the EIC to support innovations, to keep the EIC open to all innovators, and as you say, in any field at any time. And I can see as well, especially from the EIE area, that social innovations get an entry. However, when I look, for example, now at the funded projects within the EIC, it's still all deep tech, and it's still within a very, I would say, narrow set of traditional technology fields where the funding actually goes. And I was wondering if that is a maybe more transitionary phase before we see real social innovation projects being picked up also through main project funding in the EIC, or if it's something that you're just still developing. And maybe just as an unrelated question, just to add on, I'm very curious about the EIC Forum, and I was wondering which way universities can concretely participate, or how, for example, our institution could be invited into the forum. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Yves, for your question and for your interest in the presentation. To come back to your first question, this is indeed a question that comes up very often, and it is very relevant. Clearly, EIC focuses on deep tech breakthrough innovation. So even if we have this bottom-up approach, as you said, any innovator, anytime, any sector, it is is clear that it attracts probably much more deep tech companies and deep tech sector than social innovation sector or public sector. It does not mean that there is no innovation at this level. On the contrary, we have very good examples, notably through our Social Innovation Prize or through our also iCapital Awards, which on which we also here have heavily involved social innovation and public sector innovation. But I think we need to look in that specific aspect. We need to look at the purpose of also both schemes. The EIC, as I said, disruptive innovation. But I think even if it's a broad and bottom up, there is probably or certainly a place for social innovators, for instance, to intervene, to also be supported, maybe at the level of when we are dealing with at the level of the Pathfinder, when we are before this commercial phase, where the innovation is designed, where here interdisciplinarity is probably key, is essential, and I believe there is room for also social innovation maybe to emerge on those schemes. On the other hand, if you look at the EIC and the funding purposes, here the idea is also to access to equity funding, to private investment, and probably this social innovation at that level is maybe less represented in terms of the projects that could support breakthrough innovation. But there is a place, of course, for social innovation and public sector innovation, I believe, especially at the level of this pre-commercial phase and even after, to also explore new markets. But if you look at the scheme and at the purpose, it is clear that focusing on breakthrough innovation, focusing on the innovations of tomorrow and the challenges that are there, it is clear that there is a very strong focus on deep tech. And this is why also at the level of innovation ecosystems, we try also to bring in and to showcase innovation at public sector level and also at the level of social innovation, because one important element that we want to bring in as well is that we want to involve also all the players, including citizens. And it does not make any sense also having innovations on the markets if it is not the citizens and our societies that are the end beneficiaries of those innovations. So this is also why we support it via the ecosystems, and we want also to foster this. But you are right, it is probably less prominent or less represented at this stage, but there are means in order to foster this through our programs. Coming back to your the other question on the EIC forum, you are right. We have a high-level representation of the forum at the level of ministries and innovation agency. I believe that this is essential, considering that those innovation agencies and ministries and funding agencies or funding bodies are those which design the programs at national level, those which fund these programs, and so we need, in order to nurture policy making at national and at European level, we need those players represented and those discussions led also at highest level. But we have structured the EIC forum in such a way that we create dedicated working groups in order to involve also other players in the scheme. So for the time being, and so this is an evolving process, we have just launched formally the EIC forum in November last year, and we have created 5 working groups for the time being, where different stakeholders and including universities have a place in these discussions and in this dialogue that we open. We have working groups, like for instance, one working group that has been set up in order to design the future or to discuss and to provide input to the future innovation strategies that it's developed. And here, if I remember well, on this working group, we have representatives of the different stakeholders that are contributing to this process. We have also other working groups, and it is not only for universities, but we have a working group on innovation procurement. We have a working group with our EIC alumni networks. So depending on the field of expertise, depending on the discussions that we need to put forward at European level, universities also have their place in those working groups. But this depends also on the priorities. And I believe at some point, we also need to see in the future innovation strategy that will be tabled in principle in July, though this innovation strategy will also probably have some outcomes which will be translated via working groups under the EIC forum. And I hope that at this level also universities will have a role to play. But you can already see the involvement of universities and other players in our discussions. We have done it through our public consultation, the survey, and so on. So there are different means of bringing in universities and all other players of innovation ecosystem. So I do hope that I answered properly your question, Yves.
Yes, thanks so much, Fabienne. And I see from Mariolina that I can have a very brief follow-up, maybe just on the latter point on the forum and the working groups. I think that was very interesting to hear. And I would just want to add, if there's any possibility to maybe formally or informally state that, for example, our institution would have interest to be a contributor, just in general, because I do know there's many institutions out there, and many of them might be a little bit obscure to the European Commission, maybe at this level. So if there was any place to state it, that would be wonderful to know. And maybe as well, back to the social innovation bit, I think it has a little bit to do with the communication. I can see in a way the European Commission really wants to embrace this area. At the same time, it is for deep tech, I think, as you say. And I think as we are maybe trying to work quite pragmatically and as well in mobilizing and making researchers aware of this program, I think it's important that we know that we have clarity in terms of communication, what the researchers can expect to get from those, if they should follow those programs or not. And you know, and it maybe also has to do, you know, how you select the evaluators, where do they come from? If there are challenges, will there be challenges that are probably more on social innovations, if they are to be expected? So that was just some reflections from our side. Yeah.
Many thanks, Yves.
Fabienne, if I can just interject, because in the chat there is also a question from Mathilde on social innovation. So I allow myself to jump in because she also asks whether you can elaborate a bit on social innovation and what is the objective expectation regarding social innovation. So, and after you have answered, I leave the floor to Esperanza in a second instance. Thank you, Fabienne. You can reply.
Thank you, Mariolina, and thank you again, Yves, for your question, and also to Mathilde. To briefly answer your first question, Yves, to connect in order to contribute to the policy-making process, I believe here it's important also to get in touch probably with your funding bodies or funding agencies, ministries. I suppose that on your governance system put in place at national level, there are means also to reach out and to indicate your interest in attending or contributing to this policy making. There are also a number of stakeholder organizations which are involved. When we design our policies, you know that we also have in our broad public consultations, we work also a lot, cooperate a lot with the different stakeholder organizations that are, for instance, gathering European universities at European level. So here as well, there is a place to also make your voice heard and to reach out to the adequate players. It is clear that in the forum, for instance, we cannot gather all the universities that are in Europe or all or reach out to everybody, but what we tend to do is through those various means to involve the different stakeholders which are interested. And here, clearly, there is also the link to be made between the policymakers at European, at national and regional level and local level with their own stakeholders, constituencies, and also with the stakeholder organizations. That is one aspect also to keep in mind, that there are also other means to reach out in order to express your interests and the connections to be made. Then in terms of evaluators, I take your points on Eve on social innovation, and maybe that it is also a question of communicating and looking at how we also communicate about our program. I take it on board, and for us it is a very relevant comment, given that indeed disruptive innovation focuses on deep tech innovation, but I believe also that social innovators and public sector innovation, as I said, has a place, because we also need, and we can also see it through recent examples from the recent challenges that we face. It is very important also to have the right means to translate our innovation and to communicate and to bring in our innovation to the societies, to also the citizens. And here I believe social innovation has a critical role to play in order also to work hand in hand with deep tech innovation. But the message is heard, and it is important indeed. That's, as I said, that's why we are also developing those means. In terms of evaluators, because I hear a question about this, we choose the evaluations from our evaluations experts database, fully open, and probably you know how it works. And here we also try to ensure that in our panels we also have a balanced representation of experts from different sectors, from different fields. And if I look, for instance, at our iCapital Prize or social or Women Innovators Prize, here clearly we have a variety of experts involved in different fields, where we here can, of course, pick up the experts that will enable this diversity of views, that will enable this interdisciplinarity, this cross-sectoral approach also to evaluate our proposals. So this is also something that we take care about when setting also our evaluation schemes. And then the question of Mathilde, I hope I already explained a bit more what we are aiming at with social innovation. For instance, if you look at, I mean, what could be the role? If you look at the iCapital winners and some examples that we had from the past, I think about Nantes, I think about Helsingborg, for instance, recently. I think of many initiatives where social innovation clearly was critical in the innovation process of those cities. There are participatory approaches led. There is innovation that is built with the support of the social players, of the citizens, and so on. And this is in that way where we also want to make sure that social innovation and public sector goes hand in hand with technological innovation. And I believe that at the local level and at the regional level, precisely social innovation has a key role to play, and also the public sector innovation. So this is how we try to translate it and to reach out also to our end users and end beneficiaries of our support and of our initiatives, be it at European level or national level. So I hope, Mathilde, it also answered your question at that level.
Thank you very much, Fabienne. We started a little bit later, so I allow myself to go on for just a couple of more minutes. For maybe Esperanza, you had a question. We can take you as last one, please.
Thank you, Mariolina. Thank you, Fabienne. I have
Hello,
a question.
Esperanza.
I work in taxation, and I'm very, very curious now on the new developments. Of course, in the regulatory field, there are plenty of challenges. And one question that came to mind while listening to your presentation is, how is it commercial innovation going to be addressed? Commercial innovation, I mean, like in fields like in digitalization, there are specific companies that are missing, or there are not many in the European Union, like Google, like Amazon, or Facebook. Is it going to be addressed like a social innovation, or because it's not high tech, or maybe it's digital tech? How is it going to be?
I hope I understood well your question, but basically these types of innovation, I guess, are, and especially if it is in the digital field, will be addressed or are best addressed in under the EIC and also potentially under the EIT. But the idea is to address these types of innovation via the EIC, because it is first of all deep tech, digital, and it is the examples that you mentioned also to some extent is highly disruptive and also highly risky fields. So usually we address those innovations via the EIC and via the support that we bring into the EIC. There are various criteria that apply through Horizon Europe in order to be able to select our proposals at the level of the EIC Accelerator or the EIC Pathfinder. And this is, there is clearly a focus on innovation, on the implementation of the project, on excellence. What we look at is, of course, the excellence of the project. And since we have a bottom-up approach, all these innovators are welcome to contribute. The support that we want to provide to those innovators or those companies aims also at helping them growing into the market. So not only reaching out to the business and to the market, but also helping them to grow, getting also investments that they would not necessarily get without the support of a funding agency and without the support at European level, reaching out to C-level funding, investment and so on, reaching out to investors so that we can also create the unicorns of tomorrow, to give some to mention also some of our objectives. So really make sure that we have at European level those champions that we can support. And since the critical aspect of those future champions is the fact that they need support in order to grow, in order also to get access to investors, we accompany them, we provide support, and we have a dedicated fund scheme, a dedicated body that also provides rapid funding, quick funding for those companies that need also to get further funding and further investors. So this is how we see it. And given the bottom-up approach, we do not define specifically what is our, I think our commercial, the term you used, commercial innovation. It depends really on the innovation at stake, and also whether these innovations, once evaluated, whether they meet the criteria of excellence implementation and also those criteria linked to disruptive innovation.
Thank you very much, Fabienne. And with an eye on the time, we should not abuse of you and the participants' time longer. But before I close, I want to thank you again for this very useful, very interesting, really thought-provoking presentation. Thank you all again for being with us today. And well, this talk today will be made available on our website, so it can be re-listened again. And of course, stay tuned, because WhatsApp EU is coming back after the summer holidays. So we'll be back with some more talks. Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day.
Many thanks, Mariolina, and many thanks also for your attendance. I'm really sorry you could not see me on screen, but there will be other occasions, and I will be happy to further collaborate on our next calls also with the Maastricht University. So many thanks. I wish you a nice day, and hopefully see you soon. Many thanks.
Thank you, Fabienne.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.